Okay, so I remember. Okay, so I distinctly remember getting the phone call that my brother passed away in a car accident. And as I mentioned to you, this is not anything you planned for. He was 18 years old. I'm in dental school away. And when you get that type of news in your life, it's, forget not planning for it, it's not comprehensible. It's not something that you imagine would happen in your life.
Namaste and welcome to the BAPS Better Living podcast. This is the Dharmic Life series where we take everyday moments and find a way to elevate them through spirituality so that we can have greater peace, happiness, and joy. Today, we're going to discuss the reality that life rarely unfolds exactly the way we design it. I have with me today Rakhee Patel, a dentist who runs her own practice, and a woman who has experienced her fair share of unexpected moments over the years. Join us as we explore how to handle life when life doesn't go as planned. So, Rakhee, you are a dentist by profession, right? You're the owner of a woman-run business, and you have two beautiful children. You regularly volunteer at your temple, mandir, and on top of that, you seem, for all intents and purposes, pretty happy and healthy, right? I paint that picture of you because what I want to ask is the life that you have right now, did it work out as planned, right? Is this how you imagined your life would unfold?
Well, thank you for that, first of all. I would say that anybody who knows me knows that I'm a planner. At the core of who I am, I'm a type A personality. I thrive off of checklists. And we're not talking about your day-to-day grocery list, right? We're talking about 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. what I'm doing. Vacations are planned. I'm a planner. And so for me to say, has life gone according to plan? I have planned my life in such a way when I was a little girl, I prescribed to the philosophy of, when I grow up, I want to do this, and this is what my family looks like, and this is what I want to do. But to answer your question, blatantly, has life gone according to plan? Absolutely not.
You said you're type A, and I know, because I'm type A too. But what does that look like, and why? Why do you think you have this need to be that way?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about this a lot, just in day to day, because as you started off, life doesn't go according to plan. So anytime that happens, anytime the road is not a straightforward road, you pause and you think, okay, what happened? How do I change my perspective? And I think for me, that need for control it's directly related to this sense of security. There is a sense of reassurance I get from planning things. There's this solace I find in knowing, okay, well, I've planned things to go this way. And so I think it's a sense of security for me.
Okay. So, and it's like a safety, right?
Yeah.
It's much easier to kind of go ahead when you know what's coming next, or you know what to expect, right?
Yeah, I think you nailed it with the safety.
Yeah. And I think there's also a certain sort of emotional reassurance, right? To be okay, it just follows, right? The sequence of events. What do you think being a planner and a preparer, or, it's a human thing, right? At some point, isn't it a human thing? So how do we tend as people, in your opinion, confuse preparing and planning with expectations and outcomes?
Yeah, I think, Palak, when you plan, you become really invested in this plan, right? When you plan for something, the more you plan for something, the more almost attached to the outcome you become. At least that's how it is for me. When I plan to pass, I'm attached to passing. When I plan for a vacation, I want that vacation to go the way I've planned. And that attachment to the result, it's almost inevitable. And when life doesn't go according to plan, when it's not that straightforward road, when your plan requires some sort of flexibility, I think you take a moment and you step back and realize, I probably shouldn't have been attached to the result to begin with. It was just, this plan is what provides me that sense of safety.
Okay, fair. So this human like need for control, which is almost like a natural thing, right? And it's very familiar from even like my time studying psychology and all that, those college courses we take. So that makes sense. But as you're talking about it, it does make me like, it just jogs my memory on, different wisdom and faith traditions. It's the same thinking, right? It's that same idea of expectation versus outcome. And oftentimes, like what they say is, like what you're saying makes a lot of sense, except I think the difference in the lens of wisdom and faith traditions is it gives us a way to figure out what to do with it, right? Like to just be like, this is my personality. And even if you're not type A personality, right? Like you and I are, right? My husband is totally not, right? But even he, as human nature, he expects things like, even if you're not like very kind of clear cut in what it's going to look like, I think it's born out of expectation, right? What is your, I guess, experience or exposure to, I guess, how this plays out in Hinduism and the concepts that are related to this need for control, expectations, and outcomes?
Yeah. The Bhagavad Gita, an ancient Hindu scripture, uses this example. There's this shlok, I will not butcher it, but in it, Krishna Bhagwan tells Arjun, follow your dharma, fulfill your duties, don't worry about the result, leave the rest up to me. And I think that right there is the crux of it. You do what you need to do, plan what you need to plan, put in the efforts, that's your duty, that's your dharma. But the outcome, the results, leave that to God. Leave that to be, because that's not in your control. The results are not in your control. Only the efforts are.
Okay, so you shared a very real scenario that I wouldn't be surprised if many people have had similar experience, right? But since we're talking about things not going our way, right, life not going as planned, it would be remiss to not talk about something that you and I have both experienced that's deeply personal. So I hope you don't mind if I jump right in and ask you, we both lost our brothers, tragically at a young age. And that's not the sort of thing you plan for, like you don't plan for siblings, and it's not the same as I want to go to dental school, or I might get married, have children. This is just part of life, right?
Correct.
So can you talk a little bit about that, I guess, your personal experience in your situation with your brother?
Yes, I will try not to get too emotional about it. Okay, so I very vividly remember the date and the time and all of the things, as I'm sure you do too, because moments like this are not moments you plan for. And they're pivotal moments in your life. Like, they impact you dramatically. So I distinctly remember getting the phone call that my brother passed away in a car accident. And as I mentioned to you, this is not anything you planned for. He was 18 years old. I'm in dental school away. And when you get that type of news in your life, forget not planning for it. It's not comprehensible. It's not something that you imagine would happen in your life. And so when I got that call, there's this like state of shock that takes over you. And, obviously I was no different. And when that happened, when I got that call, I immediately felt pain. I immediately felt grief after we got past the shocking state. But I also knew that I'd be okay. Even right now, we're almost 20 years later, and I'm talking to you about it, and you can clearly see the emotions or clearly see me shaking, because you still feel you still feel, right? You still feel. But because of my faith, because of the things that we grew up with, because of the philosophy that we prescribed to, and we can get into that, I knew I'd be okay. I knew I wasn't going to go through this journey alone. And I think that's important to know, that our faith, or my faith, gave me a lot of strength in that moment.
But my question to you is, did you have that understanding right away? Is that something that you felt and you realized right away? Or, you know, was that your survival mode? Was that your initial reaction?
Yeah, I mean, I'm human, you know, just like
Really?
you. And I don't think that you immediately feel positive right away. No, I did not feel that. I felt pain, you know, if we're being totally raw. You're talking about my brother, right? Like someone I'm very close to, your brother, someone you're very close to. You plan life, going through life 20 years from today with your sister and brother, very much part of your life. I wanted my children to very much meet my brother, right? So that's there. When I say it was incomprehensible, there was no will my siblings be in my life or not. It was,
Of course, they will.
right, it was inevitable.
Yeah.
So when I got that news, when I got that, you know, he got in a car accident and he passed away, I felt the pain. I felt the emptiness, if you will.
And you said you were away at dental school, right?
Yeah, I lived in Arizona.
So you were alone at that time.
I
even
was
harder.
physically alone.
Physically, but like that's even harder, right? Because like you're processing this and you're pretty much propping yourself up.
Right. And I think on the receiving end of that type of news, you're not strong enough to prop yourself up. You're just not.
So then what gave you that strength? I mean, I know you talked a little bit about kind of like the philosophy we prescribe to and what we've grown up with and faith, but you know, quite honestly, in these types of situations, it's one of those things that make or break you, right? So how would you say, or how do you think in that moment or at that time, being quite a distance away from people who would normally console you, how did your faith or your upbringing give you that strength?
I don't think faith necessarily makes this like tragic situation this positive thing. I think faith is what gives you the strength to carry on. I think our faith is what allows us to become more resilient when it comes to things like this, knowing that everything happens due to the will of God.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I had a similar feeling when my brother passed. I was working in New York, and similarly, you get that phone call, and you know, immediately it's a little bit of shock, disbelief, like, did I hear this correctly, right?
Is it true?
Is it true? And I will never forget, you know, coming from New York, going back to New Jersey, arriving at the hospital, and the community that showed up. There's something to be said for being able to go through it with others, which is where my experience and your experience differ drastically, right? And, you know, that helps. It helps whenever there's something painful going on to, I mean, not physically be alone. But interestingly enough, you know, on that day and in the days that to come, as many people that filled the room, you know, who love you and support you, you still feel alone. For me, we were fortunate that our guru at the time, Brahmakuswami Maharaj, he was actually on like a spiritual tour, and he was here right in New Jersey. And so, you know, he had told my father, you know, you come meet with me, talk with me, and, you know, bring your son-in-law and bring your relatives so that, you know, I can help you get through this. And that's when you know you're not alone, right? So, the other thing that I actually want to ask you about this is, how did you maintain that balance? Like that balance between having your emotions about it, because like it's a deeply emotional thing, and functioning and figuring out how to take the next step, like on a day-to-day basis. You know what I mean?
Yeah. When you experience tragedy, it doesn't just take a life, it takes a version of your life. And you have to learn how to deal with this new version of life. So how do I get past that? And for me personally, that wouldn't have been possible without this deeply rooted belief in the fact that everything happens for a reason, and that reason, or that is due to the will of God. If I didn't have that as a fundamental core belief, I don't know that I would be standing. I don't know that I would be able to even have this conversation with you, as emotional as it is, because when you believe that to the core of who you are, you know that you're not going to go through this new version of life alone. You know that there's always going to be someone there standing, rooting for you, comforting you, and that is, for us, God and Guru. When you have children who understand that, okay, mommy had a brother, he is no longer with us, we do everything in our power to make sure that his best qualities are lived on, right? And so in the Swaminarayan faith, there's this concept, hu atma chu, hu de nathi.
And Atma being the soul.
Atma is the soul. The soul is eternal, and it carries on in its journey. We're not this body. And so that love, it doesn't disappear. It just takes on a different form. And that's important to note, because we're able to imbibe the best qualities of him today in our day-to-day. So that, and this is just like a small example of that on this trip, but when you say, how do we kind of take it down to the day-to-day, in this huge example, right? Like in this massive pivotal moment in my life, where life just throws this curveball at you and you're forced to pivot, prescribing to the fact that God is the all-doer, or sarva kartapano, as we know of it in the Swaminarayan faith, knowing that he ultimately is the controller of the results. The efforts are the only thing in our hand. And whether that means going to the grocery store because you're looking for X cheese because that's what you're going to make for dinner and it's no longer there, or you're studying really hard for an exam and you didn't get the results you wanted to get, what is the lesson of growth? What exactly is going to make us resilient from that? And how do we grow from that? Because ultimately, if in the curveball of life, or if in whatever life throws at you, you don't grow, then did that lesson teach you anything?
Like, it's almost, what was the purpose?
Then it is true failure, because there was no growth that came out of it. Failure is only a failure without growth, right? And so learn something from it, because it is inevitable. Life will throw curveballs at you, and I hope they're not in the form of a tragic death. But death is also inevitable, right? And so what is the learning? What is the lesson to be learned? And how do you come out stronger? How do you come out really standing on your two feet? And are you prepared for the next thing? Because you won't go through it alone. Like, that is 100% sure, right? Somebody's by your side.
Absolutely. And what's playing in my mind as you're talking about this is what you just said, like in the very beginning just now, that concept of like the Atma, the soul, right? And like the body is temporary and you're just kind of cycling through this life. And it just made me think of, in Hinduism, we talk about how like nothing is permanent, right? change, we've heard the only constant in life is change,
Yep.
right? But nothing is permanent. The relationships we have, they're constantly changing. Our bodies are constantly changing. Our circumstances are constantly changing. And so I guess the only constant that we actually have is that we can't worry about what's coming next, and we just have to expect the unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're talking about sarva kartapanu, everything being at God's will. I think it's important to point out that that's not just the negative things in life.
Right.
We almost see it more when things don't go our
Mm-hmm.
way, but like how often do we really see it when things worked out just fine?
God is compassionate.
Absolutely.
Right? Like he's there. There's no desire to inflict pain on us. I mean, there are countless scenarios, countless stories of the infinite love he has for us, right? And so that is not the purpose, but helping us become resilient so that we can navigate through the ups and downs of life. Budget cut, job rejection, tragedy, death, failing a paper, failing a class, whatever it be.
Mm-hmm.
Navigating that, that makes you stronger, right? That helps you find solace in knowing that, okay, I can handle it. I can handle it.
Yeah.
Good, bad, positive, negative, all of it is from God, who is so, so, so compassionate.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's interesting that you say that, because with that job, when I lost the supervising position and went back into the coaching position, at that time it was like a jolt of reality, but very shortly thereafter it became a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
Because I realized how much I loved being an instructional coach. And my husband himself pointed out that, Palak, when you were like that year when you were going into central administration and you were a supervisor, like you didn't come home happy, like you looked stressed all the time. And I think that's where like the compassion piece that you're talking about comes from. When we think of God being compassionate, it's easy to see that as nothing should ever go wrong.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like this idea of peace and solace, it doesn't just come when life goes according to plan or when life goes our way, right? It's in the moments when life doesn't go according to plan. Even getting the shocking phone call that your brother, who you just spoke to, right?
Yeah.
Like you just spoke to him the day before. What are you talking about that he's no longer here? Getting those type of phone calls while you feel pain, while you feel this feeling of emptiness, there's also a sense of solace in knowing I'm going to make it.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to be okay. And for a fact, I felt that. Like, and you did too, because
Yeah.
we've talked about it.
And we talk about it all the time.
Correct. And that wasn't like an internal thing, right? Like that wasn't because I was this like strong person or I didn't have the bond with my brother. It's because I knew I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
It's because we knew that everything that did happen was due to God's will.
So, being a mother, you being a mother as well, we're talking about all these things, and we have, I guess you can say, a little bit of life experience. Just a little. But how do you pass this idea and these concepts of life is constantly changing, God is the all-doer and things good and bad happen at God's will, and like just have faith and your faith will give you strength. How do you pass that on? Either if it's your children or if you're talking to, I know you have a few nieces and nephews that are in college, right? So like they're not going through heavy things in life, but to them it's heavy.
Right.
So how do you share that, like what you've learned? How do you share that with others?
A lot of times, if I'm feeling emotion, or if it's, let's say, my brother's birthday, or if it's, his anniversary of the day he went to Akshardham, we'll vocally talk, we'll verbalize the way we're feeling. We'll talk about his characteristics, just so the kids, my boys, understand that I'm human too. I feel these emotions. And so to talk about our emotions, because I didn't grow up like that, is really important. And so I do make it a point to ensure that happens in our house, or even our extended family, whether it's my nieces or my nephews or my own children, and even with my husband. Like we'll talk about the way I'm feeling or the way he's feeling, and I think there's a sense of understanding that comes with vocalizing things, and that's important, in addition to the way we're living life. I mean, you started off saying, like, for all intents and purposes, you have everything figured out. And I'm just figuring it out, just like the rest of the folks, right?
Yeah.
And so, but communicating about your emotions and what you're feeling. Are you overwhelmed? Did my checklist get too long? Are there a lot of things going on? Talking those things out, just in doing so, just the activity, the idea of doing it, you almost by default realize I'm not alone. And it's not my husband that's with me. It's not my children that's with me. It's God that's with me, because throughout every phase of my life, whether I was 5 or I am where I'm at today, the one constant has been God.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? He's never stopped letting go of my hand. So why do I all of a sudden, why would he today?
And that's the relationship that hasn't changed, right? Like, so many of our relationships change because people change.
Right.
You know, and as you're talking about having the conversations, that resonates with me, because I think that's what it is. When we're experiencing things, if we don't talk about either a change in perspective, or if we just kind of like casualize and like, okay, yeah, this happened, but that there's nothing like to learn or grow from there. And sometimes it's, if our kids or our family or friends, they see what's going on with us, and we're kind of vocalizing how it made us feel. You know, I'll never forget, it was, I would say, about 2.5 years ago, my husband lost his job. And it was, you know, I mean, we know what the economy is like right now. And unfortunately, that's happening to a lot of people even still. And, you know, when he came home and he was talking to my kids, and he's like, well, I guess we'll just tell them. And I said, well, yeah, of course, right? This is the new reality. And at that time, they asked a lot of questions, but out of everything, you know, their questions are, oh, but then, like, how will you make money? And natural things, right? Because they understand, they're old enough to understand that, like, this is how a household functions, and this is how we have the things that we want, right? And that you have responsibilities. And, you know, vocalizing that conversation that, you know, he said, well, I mean, it's okay. I'll find another one, you know? It might be, like, along the way. We might just need to cut back on some things, and we just have to think a little bit more intentionally. But, you know, I mean, this job, it was a little more stressful than I anticipated. And it's just framing it differently and trying to give people having a different lens yourself. But also, like, I think that's how we pass on our life experiences. And I think that's also how we pass on the things that we've learned through our faith. Because that's a lot of times, like, what our guru talks about, right? That, you know, like, just change the perspective and see not the positive in everything, but don't get bogged down in like the negativity. Don't get overwhelmed by that, because it's all temporary. So I know we've kind of talked about a lot of things today. Starting out with your perfect life, which apparently is just as imperfect as the rest of ours. But I did want to just, I guess, bring back some practical things that you and I can sort of walk away with from our conversation. And I would say the things that I'm hearing, or what I took from what you've shared, is, like, first of all, it's in our nature to want to figure out what's next and control as much of our life as we can,
Right.
which is okay. But with that, don't get attached to a certain expectation or a result or an outcome.
Correct.
Another thing that you kind of shared that kind of resonated with me is that don't get overwhelmed in the moment, right? Like, you have to pause and take things as they come, because it is easy to get overwhelmed, but you have to choose. It's really a choice, actually.
It is. You
have to choose if you want something to control you, or if you want to have a little bit more control over yourself.
Absolutely.
And in whatever happens in life, we are not alone. If you're in a room full of people, or if you're literally by yourself, we're not alone, and we don't need to carry our burdens alone either. Because if just by a little bit of faith, and constantly revisiting and strengthening that faith, it makes it easier to figure out how to move on and learn from whatever experiences that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you could take away anything from our conversation today, it is that change is inevitable, that life will throw curveballs at you. Those curveballs will come in different shapes and sizes at different speeds. But with each curveball, you can strengthen your faith in God, understand a little bit more that He's guiding you, that He's protecting you, then you will come out tenfold better than you were before the incident.
Absolutely. And these things make you stronger.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I know this was something that you and I have sort of dabbled on, just informally, but, to see kind of how it brings you to who you are today and, shapes who I am today, I think is the most valuable lesson, that even when life doesn't go as planned, it might not be the life that we imagined, but in the end, it's still going to be a good life.
Absolutely. It was a humbling experience. So thanks.
Life not going as planned is not proof that life is ruined. Sometimes it is where depth, surrender, compassion, and real faith actually begin. We may not always get the life we imagined, but through effort, faith, and God's grace, we can still become who we were meant to be and still have a pretty good life.